Take everything away from a wealthy family, all of it. The accounts, the property, the business, the name. Leave them with nothing but their clothes in a city where nobody knows them. Give them 10 years. Most of them are back. Not all, but a number so high it should disturb you. Different city, different industry. Sometimes a smaller version of what they had, but back in a position that most people never reach in a lifetime of working. Now run it the other way. Take somebody who has never had money and hand them a large amount. This experiment runs constantly in the real world, in public, and you have watched the results your whole life. The money is gone, not in 10 years, in 2, sometimes in 1. And it does not go because they were stupid or lazy. It goes through 100 small movements that all made sense in the moment, and at the end there is a person standing in the same place they started, with better stories. Same amount of money, opposite outcomes, which tells you something that should reorganize how you think about this entire subject. The money was never the variable. What separates those two families is a thing that can be taken. Not earned over decades, not married into, not waited for. Taken deliberately by an adult without anyone's permission and without anybody in that family ever knowing it happened. You can adopt yourself into a wealthy family. I mean that as a procedure, not as a metaphor to make you feel better. There is a specific set of things a person receives by being raised inside money. All of it installed before the age of 10, none of it secret, and every single item on that list can be installed in you on purpose, starting tonight. Nobody checks your birth certificate at the door, that is what this video is. But you cannot adopt what you cannot see. So first I have to show you exactly what that child receives, item by item, because it is far more specific than you think, and if that is still too abstract, shrink it down to 2 people. Take 2 sisters. Same house, same parents, same school, same bone structure, 11 months apart. One of them ends up comfortable, and the other one ends up struggling, and every explanation anyone offers is obviously insufficient. It was not intelligence. They tested the same. It was not effort. The struggling one usually worked harder. It was not opportunity. They had the same doors. What actually separated them was almost always something absurdly small and early. One of them was in the room on a particular evening, and the other was asleep. One of them was old enough to understand the tone of a conversation, and the other one was not. One of them got a version of a parent who was frightened that year, and the other got the same parent 2 years later, after it had passed. An assumption does not need repetition to install. It needs one moment with enough feeling in it, at an age where you have no capacity to reject anything, and then it runs for 40 years. So when you look at somebody who is doing better than you, and you assume there was a resource you did not get, you are usually wrong. There was a sentence you did not get, or a sentence you got and they did not. Something else is being transferred inside wealthy families, something that survives when the accounts are emptied and gets rebuilt from nothing, and it is not education, and it is not connections, and it is not a secret investment strategy that gets whispered at the dinner table. If it were information, it would be in books, and it is in books, and reading them changes nothing for most people, which you already know because you have read some. What gets inherited is an assumption. It gets installed before the age of 10. It operates for the rest of that person's life without ever being examined, and it is the reason a person can lose everything and rebuild while somebody else can receive everything and lose it. And that is the whole reason the adoption is possible. An assumption is not genetic. It is not in the blood, it is not in the name, and there is no version of it that only functions in people who received it as children. Let me start with the one that does most of the damage, because it is a single sentence. The wealthy child never hears, "We cannot afford that." Not once, and this is not because they get everything they ask for. That is the part people get wrong. Wealthy families refuse their children constantly, often more than poor families do, because they are worried about producing someone soft. The refusal is worded differently. The poor family says, "We cannot afford that." The wealthy family says, "We are not buying that." Sit with the difference, because it is the difference between 2 entire lives. We cannot afford that describes an incapacity. There is a wall, the wall is external, the wall decides, and the people in this room are on the wrong side of it. The child learns that the wall exists and that adults are subject to it. The child does not question this. Children do not evaluate what adults say. They absorb it as the structure of reality, the same way they absorb gravity. We are not buying that describes a decision. There is no wall. There is a person with authority who has weighed the thing and declined it. The money was available. The answer was still no, And the answer came from a person, not from a limit. The first child grows up inside a house with a boundary in it. The second grows up inside a house with a decision maker in it. And 30 years later, one of them says, I cannot afford it about a thing they could actually afford. And the other one says, I do not want it about a thing they could not afford. And both of them are simply repeating the room they grew up in. You know which one you got. You can hear it right now in the voice it was said in. Second thing that gets installed, and this one is not verbal at all, the temperature of the room when money comes up. In most homes, money enters a conversation and something in the air changes. Voices get lower or sharper. A parent goes quiet. There is a piece of paper on the table that nobody is picking up. The children are not being told anything, and they do not need to be told because they are reading the temperature. And the temperature says clearly that a dangerous subject has entered the house. That is the entire lesson, and it does not require a single word. Money equals threat. It gets learned in one evening before the child can read, and it never gets reviewed again because it never became a thought in the first place. It became a physical setting. Which is why today at 35 years old your chest does something when you open your banking app before you have seen any number. You are not reacting to your finances. You are reacting to a room you were in when you were 6. In a wealthy house, money comes up and the temperature does not change. There are conversations about large amounts in the same voice used to discuss the weekend. Sometimes there are losses, and they are discussed the same way. A bad year is a bad year. It is weather, not judgment. Third, price is information, not a verdict about you. Watch a person from a poor background look at a price tag. There is a pause, and in that pause something is being evaluated, and it is not the item. They are checking their own worth against a number and receiving a ruling. That is why the wrong price produces something that feels like shame, rather than something that feels like arithmetic. Watch a wealthy person look at a price. The number is data. It goes into a calculation about value and priority, and whether the thing is worth it, and the calculation returns yes or no. And no is not a wound. They walk away from things they can easily afford all day long, and it costs them nothing emotionally, because the number was never a statement about them. Fourth, and this one is the deepest of all of them, and the hardest to hear. In a wealthy home, money is infrastructure, not a goal, not a dream, not a source of hope or fear. Infrastructure, like electricity in the walls or running water. Think about your relationship with water in your house. You do not celebrate it. You do not visualize it. You do not feel a rush when the tap works. You do not check the pipes for evidence. You do not have a complicated emotional history with plumbing. It is simply there, doing its job, and you think about it approximately never. That is exactly how money sits in a wealthy person's mind. Present, functional, boring, and not a subject of drama in either direction. Now compare that to your relationship with money. It is the most emotionally loaded subject in your life. It carries hope and fear and shame and desire and identity all at once. You think about it many times a day. You feel something every time it comes up. And here is the part that should stop you cold. That intensity is not devotion, and it is not motivation, and it does not help you accumulate it. It is the clearest possible signal that you do not have it. Nobody has an emotional relationship with something they consider ordinary. So every time you feel that surge about money, you are demonstrating to the only system that is listening that this is not a normal part of your life. And the demonstration is more convincing than any affirmation you could make afterward. Fifth, the assumed future. Listen to how adults speak about a wealthy child's future, and then listen to how they spoke about yours. Around that child, you hear things like when you are running your own thing, and you will figure out what to do with the property later, and when you have a family of your own. All of it stated as scheduling. The shape of the life is a settled matter, and only the details are pending. Around most children, the language is conditional. If things go well, if you are lucky, if you work hard, maybe. Hopefully, a child raised inside conditional language learns that a good life is a lottery outcome that certain people get, and a person who believes that will always, at some level, be waiting to find out whether they are one of the selected. Whereas a person raised inside scheduling language never asks whether, they only ask when, and that single difference produces two entirely different sets of behavior over 30 years without either person ever noticing they were carrying an assumption. Sixth, loss is an event, not an identity. This one is the reason the stripped family rebuilds. When a wealthy family has a bad year, the sentence in the house is, "We had a bad year." It is bounded. It has a beginning and an end. It sits in the calendar, not in the person. When money goes wrong in a poor family, the language transforms into identity. We are broke. Things never work out for us. That is how it goes for people like us. Now it is not an event, it is a description of the family, and every future event gets filed under that description as further evidence. That is why you can take the property from one family, and they treat it as a chapter, and hand a large amount to another family, and it dissolves. Because the second family is not experiencing money as their situation, they are experiencing it as a temporary visitor in a life that is fundamentally something else. And the visitor leaves because visitors do. Seventh, and this one costs people more actual income than any of the others. Asking is normal. In a wealthy home, a child watches adults ask for things constantly. They ask for a better rate. They ask for the discount. They ask somebody to introduce them to somebody. They ask for more than what was offered calmly in a level voice, and then they wait. And if the answer is no, the conversation continues pleasantly, and nobody is embarrassed. The child learns that asking is a normal move available to normal people, and that a no costs nothing. In most homes, the child sees the opposite. Asking happens when things have gotten bad. It has a tone. There is tension before it, and relief or humiliation afterward, and the whole event is remembered. The child learns that asking is what you do when you have failed, and that it exposes you. Then that child grows up and cannot say a number without their voice changing, cannot follow up on an unanswered message because it would look desperate, cannot request the raise, so they wait to be noticed for 11 years, hoping the value they produce will be recognized without them ever having to name it. And they are not shy, and they are not lacking confidence in general. They are running a specific rule about a specific act, learned from a room decades ago. Count how much money that one has taken from you. Not lost opportunities in general, just the times you did not ask. Add it up honestly, and it is usually larger than everything else in this list combined. Now, before I show you how this gets installed in an adult who never received any of it, I want you to do something with the 7 I just gave you. Go back through them and mark which ones you got. Not which ones you agree with, which ones were actually running in the house you grew up in. Almost nobody listening to this got 0 out of 7. Most of you got 1 or 2 in a partial form from one parent, in a house where the other parent was running the opposite program, which is its own particular kind of confusion. And I want to say one thing clearly before we continue, because this is the moment where people start assembling a case against their parents. None of this was done to you. Every one of those 7 was installed by people who were themselves running it, absorbed from their own kitchen table, from adults who absorbed it from theirs. Nobody sat down and decided to hand you a ceiling. It moved through the family the way an accent moves through a family, invisibly, faithfully for generations, and everyone who passed it on was doing their best inside the only assumption they had ever been given. You are not owed an apology, and you do not need one, and waiting for one keeps you inside the story. What you have is a program with a known source and a known content, which is far more than most people ever get, because most people carry it their entire lives without once seeing it written out. Before I show you the installation, there is one thing I want to point you toward. The work I am about to describe requires you to hold a scene in your mind for a few minutes at night without your attention scattering. And that is the exact point where a lot of people find out their imagination has never been trained. They understand everything, they agree with everything, and they cannot keep an image still for 15 seconds. That is not a character problem, it is a skill nobody taught them. There is a program dealing specifically with that, and the link is in the pinned comment because I have been asked about it repeatedly. I did not create it, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. I point at it because it does that one narrow job well. If that is your obstacle, look at it. If it is not, stay with me, because what comes next is the actual transfer, and you can run it on yourself. Here is the part that changes everything. An assumption does not check your paperwork. It does not ask what your parents did, or what school you went to, or how much was in the house when you were 9. It has no way of knowing any of that. An assumption is simply a state that is occupied, and Neville was absolutely relentless on this point, because it was the entire foundation of his work. He said that you can assume any state you please, and that the state, once occupied and persisted in, will harden into fact. He did not add conditions to that. There was no clause about origin, no clause about deserving, no clause about who your family was. Nobody is guarding the door. There is no committee that reviews whether you came from the right home before allowing you to occupy the state of a person for whom money is ordinary. So the transfer is available, but there is one distinction you have to get right, and if you get it wrong, everything after it fails, and almost everybody gets it wrong. You must not assume that you just got rich. Read that carefully because it goes against every instinct you have. The scene you are drawn to, the one your mind goes to automatically, is the arrival, the notification, the transfer landing, the moment of the news, the reaction on your face. That is the scene everyone rehearses, and it is the wrong scene, and it is why people manifest a windfall and watch it dissolve in 14 months, because the state of a person who just got money is the state of a poor person holding money. That is exactly what it is. In that scene you are amazed, you are relieved. Something enormous has just changed, and the size of your reaction is a precise measurement of how far outside your normal life the event is. And a system that has just been handed something enormously outside its normal range does what every system does, which is correct back toward the setting it knows. That is not a punishment. It is regulation. It is the same reason a house returns to its thermostat setting, no matter how long you leave the window open. The wealthy family does not have that problem, because nobody in it ever had the arrival scene. There was no before. The second generation opens their eyes into a world where this was already the case, and the money is not an event. It is the floor. So this is the state you occupy at night, and it is very specific, not the day it arrived. An ordinary Tuesday afternoon, 6 years in. Nothing is happening. You're in the middle of a normal week. Something needed to be paid, and it was paid days ago, and you do not remember doing it. Somebody mentions an amount that would once have made your chest tighten, and your face does nothing at all. You have a small logistical problem about a thing you own, which is mildly annoying, the way real problems are. And the entire time in the background, this is simply how it has always been for you, and there is no part of you that finds it remarkable. That last quality is the whole thing, not the money, the unremarkableness. If your scene has any excitement in it, you are rehearsing the poor person's version. Take it out. Boredom is the correct emotional signature, and it is the hardest thing to counterfeit, which is why it works. You cannot fake being bored by something you desperately want, so if you can actually reach that flatness, it is because a real shift occurred. Now let me give you the installation, item by item, matched to the 7 things a wealthy child receives. Some of these you do at night. Most of them you do in daylight in the middle of a normal week, and they cost nothing. The first one is a language change, and it is the fastest result you will get from this entire video. You stop saying, "I cannot afford that," permanently. Out loud and inside your head, you replace it with, "I am not buying that," or "That is not what I am spending money on," or "No, I do not want that." This is not a positive thinking exercise. Watch what actually changes. "I cannot afford that" hands the decision to an external wall and puts you underneath it. "I'm not buying that" keeps the authority in your hands. The outcome is identical. The item stays on the shelf, and the position you occupied while it happened is opposite. You will say this 30 times a week, which means you have been making 30 deposits a week into an assumption of incapacity, and you can convert every one of them into a deposit of authority starting today at no cost with no time investment. Do this one for a week, and something odd happens. You will feel a small resistance the first several times, like a slight lie in your mouth. That resistance is the old program. Keep going. Around day 4, the new sentence starts to sound normal, and around day 10, you will notice you feel differently walking out of a store without something, and that is the tell. Second, take the temperature out of the subject. The rule is simple. No drama in either direction. That means you stop dreading it, which you already know. But it also means you stop celebrating it, and this half is the one nobody tells you. When a small amount comes in unexpectedly, and you feel that lift and you want to tell somebody, and you want to mark it as a sign that things are turning around, do not. Every time you treat money as an occasion, you are testifying that it is not ordinary in your life. Receive it flatly. Of course, about time, and then think about something else. This is not about suppressing joy. Be delighted about your life. Be delighted about the work, the person, the meal, the day. Just do not make the money itself an event. because events are by definition unusual, and unusual things do not repeat. Third, price becomes data. Here is a drill, and it works quickly. Go and look at expensive things you're not going to buy, in person if you can. Go into the store, handle it, look at the number, and then practice returning a calm no. Not, I cannot have this. Just, not today, this is not what I'm doing this month. Then leave without the sting. You are training out the flinch by exposing yourself to prices in a situation where nothing is at stake. And you will notice the first few times how much your body wants to make it about your worth. Notice it, do not fight it, and walk out relaxed. Do this a few times, and the flinch loses most of its power, because you have given your system repeated evidence that a large number can appear in front of you and nothing happens afterward. Fourth, loss becomes an event, not a description. Listen to how you talk about your worst financial period. If you find identity language in it, and you will, change the grammar. I am broke becomes, this month is tight. I never have money becomes, that year was bad. Things never work out for me becomes, that specific thing did not work. You are putting the event back inside the calendar where it belongs, instead of leaving it inside yourself where it becomes a permanent feature. And you have to be strict about this because identity language is comfortable. It explains everything and it excuses everything, and it is running quietly in almost every conversation you have about your situation. Fifth, your future goes into scheduling language. Take the conditional out of how you speak about your own life. If things go well becomes when this is running. Hopefully I will becomes I will. Maybe one day becomes the specific, ordinary phrasing you would use for something already on the calendar. Do this especially when speaking to other people, because that is where the old language is strongest and where you are least likely to catch it. Somebody asks about your plans, and there is a small hedge that goes in automatically. A little softening, we will see, fingers crossed if it all goes to plan. Cut it. Say the thing plainly and let it sit there. The hedge is not humility. The hedge is a person leaving themselves an exit, and everyone hears it, including you. Sixth, you ask for something every week. This is the drill people avoid, and it is the one that produces money fastest. Once a week you make an ask. Ask for a better rate. Ask for the discount. Ask to be introduced to somebody. Ask for the extra thing to be included. Follow up on the message that was never answered. Say a higher number than you were going to say and then stop talking. The point is not the yes. The point is repetition. You are converting asking from a significant event into a routine motion, and the only way to do that is volume. After 8 or 10 of these, the act stops carrying weight. And when it stops carrying weight, your voice changes. And when your voice changes, the answers change. Seventh, the night work, which is where the actual state gets set. 8 minutes lying down at the edge of sleep, where the body is heavy and thinking has slowed. And you occupy the ordinary Tuesday, not the arrival, 6 years in. Physical detail, first person, and the emotional target is flat. Run it until it is boring, and fall asleep inside it. Now the objection that stops most people, and I want to handle it directly, because it is not intellectual and it will not be argued away. Some of you feel a resistance to this that has nothing to do with whether it works. It feels like a betrayal, because if you become the person who does not say I cannot afford it, you are stepping outside your family. You are becoming somebody who is not like them. And there is a very old, very quiet loyalty in you that says, if you rise too far, you are saying they were wrong, or that you are better, or that you are leaving. That loyalty is real and it is not stupid. It is love, expressed as a limit, and it has kept more people at a specific income level than any economic force in the world, because it operates entirely below the level of argument. You will find yourself doing something self-defeating, and you will have no idea why, and the reason is that succeeding felt like walking out of a room where people you love are still sitting. Here is the reframe, and I want you to take it seriously. You are not saying they were wrong. They were running the only assumption they were ever handed, and they ran it as well as anyone could. You are not condemning anybody. You are ending a transmission. Because that program is not going to stop on its own. It moved from your grandparents to your parents to you, and it will move to whoever comes after you, in the same way, invisibly, through the temperature of a room and a sentence said in a store. And the only way it stops is if one person in the line becomes the point where it ends. That is available to you. That is what you are actually doing here. And think about what actually gets handed down if you do it. Not an inheritance, something much cheaper and much more powerful. A child in your house hears we are not buying that instead of we cannot afford that, and grows up without a wall in their head. Money comes up at your table, and the temperature does not change, and they never learn the flinch, so they never spend 20 years trying to remove it. They watch you ask for things calmly, and receive a no without embarrassment, and asking stays an ordinary motion for the rest of their life. That costs you nothing. It requires no capital, and it is worth more to them than any amount you could leave behind, which you already know because you have watched what happens to people who receive amounts without receiving the assumption. And if there are no children in your life, it still holds, because you are not only the transmitter, you are the receiver too. The person who has been carrying this since they were 6 is still in there, and they are the one you are actually doing this for. And the other objection, which is simpler, it is too late, I am 45, this was set when I was a child. Look at how fast it was installed the first time. One evening, one sentence in a store, one conversation you were not supposed to hear. A child installs a lifelong assumption in a single afternoon because a child cannot reject anything, and the material arrives with full feeling and goes straight in. You have lost that automatic acceptance, which is the disadvantage, but you have something the child never had, which is enormous. You can choose the material. You can select the state deliberately and deliver it into the same unguarded condition every single night, at the edge of sleep, where the same door is open that was open when you were 6. The child got it by accident once. You get to do it on purpose, repeatedly. That is not a worse position. In most cases, it is a better one. Let me tell you what the first month actually looks like, because it does not look like money and people quit over that. The first thing that changes is your mouth. Within a week, you will be halfway through saying, I cannot afford it, and you will hear it coming and stop. That catch, that half second where you notice the sentence before it leaves, is the single most important signal in this entire process, and it means the program has moved from invisible to visible, which is where it becomes editable. The second thing is that the flinch fades. You will open your banking app and your body will do nothing. Not because the number improved, because you stopped experiencing a number as a verdict. The third thing is strange enough that people write to me about it. Conversations start going differently. You will be in an exchange about money, and there will be a silence where you would normally have filled it with a softening sentence, and you will simply not fill it. And the other person will move first. You did not learn a technique. You just stopped doing the thing you did not know you were doing. The fourth thing is that the family loyalty shows up, usually in week 2 or 3, and it will not announce itself honestly. It arrives as a sudden urge to be practical, a voice that says this is childish, that you have real responsibilities, that people like you should focus on stability. That voice sounds like maturity, and it is not. It is the transmission defending itself. Recognize it and keep going. And the fifth thing, usually last, is that money moves, and it almost always comes sideways from a direction you were not watching, through somebody you had not thought about in a year. Here is your 30 days. Every day, the language. I am not buying that. Never, I cannot afford it. The conditional comes out of your future. Identity language comes out of your losses. Every week, one ask. Any ask. Volume over importance. Once early, go handle something expensive and walk out calm. And every night, 8 minutes, the ordinary Tuesday 6 years in, until it goes flat. And then sleep. 30 days. And then look at how you speak, because that is where you will see it first. You will hear yourself say something in a conversation that the old version of you could not have said, and you will notice it happened without any effort at all. Now I want something from you in the comments, and I want you to be specific. Tell me the sentence, the one that was said in your house, in the voice it was said in. We cannot afford it. Money does not grow on trees. People like us do not do that. Do you think I am made of money? Whatever yours was, write it down exactly, because most of you have never once seen it in written form, and it looks very different on a screen than it does in your body. And read the other ones. You are going to see your own family in the sentences of strangers from other countries, and that alone will tell you something about how impersonal this always was. Subscribe if you want the rest of this. I put out one piece of this system every other day. You are not the last of a broke family. You are the first of another one.